The energy restraints hummed against Zara Voss's wrists as she sat in the sterile white chamber, her dark hair falling across her face like a curtain of defeat. 3 days had passed since the diplomatic shuttle had been intercepted. 3 days since her world had turned upside down. The universal translator device around her neck felt heavier now, its crystalline surface flickering with dormant energy that seemed to mock her current helplessness. "You understand our language better than you pretend," came a voice from the shadows beyond the translucent barrier. The speaker stepped into the light, revealing features that were almost human, but not quite. Elongated ears, silver-flecked skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial lighting, and eyes the color of deep ocean waters. He was tall and lean, moving with a fluid grace that spoke of both strength and restraint. Zara lifted her chin defiantly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I understand enough to know you're making a mistake. I'm not a spy. I'm a xenolinguist. My only crime is trying to build bridges between our peoples." The alien, she had learned his name was Vex during the interrogation sessions, circled her chair slowly, his footsteps silent on the polished floor. "Bridges," he repeated, and there was something almost wistful in his tone. "How poetic. Yet your people sent warships to escort your diplomatic mission. Standard protocol." Zara replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We're exploring unknown territory. The escorts were for protection, not aggression." Vex paused. In front of her, those oceanic eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the cool air. "You speak our language with remarkable fluency for someone who claims to have just learned it." Zara's breath caught. She had been careful, so careful, to use only basic phrases during their conversations, but during the long hours of captivity, she had absorbed far more of their speech patterns than she had revealed. The translator device around her neck was more than just a communication tool. It was a learning matrix designed to rapidly assimilate new languages and cultural nuances. "The translator is sophisticated," she said, gesturing to the device. "It adapts quickly, indeed." Vex knelt beside her chair, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could see the faint luminescence beneath his skin, the way his pupils dilated slightly when he looked at her. "But it cannot explain why you carry a resonance frequency that matches our sacred texts." Zara's blood ran cold. The resonance frequency, it was something she had discovered during her research. A harmonic pattern that seemed to appear in the linguistic structures of dozens of species across the galaxy. She had theorized that it might be some kind of universal communication constant, but she had never imagined it would be recognized by an alien species. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but the life felt heavy on her tongue. Vex's hand moved to a control panel on the wall, and the chamber's lighting shifted to a warm amber glow. "The frequency is embedded in your neural patterns. Our scanners detected it the moment you came aboard. It is the signature of the ancients, the first race to achieve interstellar communication." "The ancients are a myth," Zara protested, though even as she spoke, she remembered the strange dreams that had plagued her since childhood. Dreams of vast cities among the stars, of beings who spoke in harmonics that bypassed the need for words entirely. "Are they?" Vex stood and moved to a wall panel, his fingers dancing over controls that responded to his touch with soft chimes. The chamber's walls suddenly became transparent, revealing a vast space filled with floating holographic displays. Data streams flowed like rivers of light, and at the center of it all was a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, pulsing with the same frequency that Zara felt deep in her bones. "This is why you were taken," Vex said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. "Not as a prisoner, but as a protector. There are forces in the galaxy that would use your gift to dominate rather than unite." Zara stared at the display, her mind racing. The patterns were familiar, achingly so. They resonated with something deep in her consciousness, a knowledge she had never learned but somehow possessed. "What gift?" "You can speak to all species simultaneously," Vex explained, moving closer to her chair. "Not just translate their words, but communicate directly with their consciousness. It is a power that has not been seen for millennia." "That's impossible," Zara breathed. But even as she spoke, she felt the truth of it stirring within her. The Translator device around her neck began to glow more brightly, responding to her emotional state. Vex knelt beside her again, his expression earnest. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications suggesting that your diplomatic mission was a cover for something far more sinister. A faction within your government seeks to weaponize the ancient technology, to use it to control the minds of other species. That's not true, Zara said, but doubt crept into her voice. There had been aspects of the mission that she had found strange, the unusual security protocols, the secrecy surrounding her selection as the primary linguist, the way certain officials had avoided her questions about the mission's true purpose. Perhaps not consciously, Vex conceded, but you carry within you the key to either galactic peace or galactic domination. We could not allow that key to fall into the wrong hands. The restraints around Zara's wrists suddenly released, and she rubbed her freed hands together, feeling the circulation return to her fingers. So what now? You keep me here forever. Now, Vex said, extending his hand to her, we offer you a choice. Return to your people and become a tool of conquest, or stay with us and learn to use your gift for its intended purpose, to unite the galaxy in understanding. Zara looked at his outstretched hand, then at the swirling galaxy map that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The translator device around her neck hummed softly, and for just a moment, she could swear she heard voices, not words, but pure communication. The thoughts and feelings of countless beings across the stars. If I stay, she said slowly, what happens to the diplomatic mission? To the people who sent me? Vex's expression grew grave. War, most likely. Without proof of the conspiracy, your disappearance will be seen as an act of aggression. The warships that escorted you are already massing at the border. Then I have to go back, Zara said, starting to rise from the chair. Wait. Vex's hand closed gently around her wrist, and she felt a shock of connection, not physical, but something deeper. For an instant, she could sense his thoughts, his fears, his desperate hope for peace. There's another way. Zara sank back into the chair, her heart pounding. What way? The resonance frequency you carry, it can be shared, not permanently, but long enough to establish true communication between our species. If you were willing to undergo the bonding process. Bonding, Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Vex's cheeks darkened with what might have been a blush. It requires intimate contact, a joining of consciousness that would allow me to carry a portion of your gift back to your people. We could serve as living bridges between our species. The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. Not just the practical aspects, but the personal ones. She had felt the connection when he touched her, the way her consciousness had briefly merged with his. It had been unlike anything she had ever experienced, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And if I refuse, then we return you to your people and hope that wiser heads prevail before the shooting starts. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of two civilizations resting on her shoulders. When she opened them again, Vex was watching her with an expression of such gentle hope that it made her chest ache. This bonding process, she said carefully, it's permanent. The connection would fade over time. Vex admitted, but the understanding would remain. You would always be able to sense my thoughts, and I yours, even across the vastness of space. Zara stood slowly, her legs unsteady after days of captivity. She walked to the transparent wall and placed her palm against it, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship's engines through the barrier. Beyond the wall, stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, fleets were gathering for a war that could destroy everything. There's something you should know, she said without turning around. The dreams I've been having, they're not just dreams, are they? No, Vex said quietly. They are memories. The ancients live on, in those who carry their gift. You are their heir, Zara Voss, and through you, the galaxy might yet find peace. She turned to face him, and in that moment, she made her choice, not with words, but with a gesture that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. She reached up and removed the translator device from around her neck, holding it out to him. Show me, she said simply. Vex's eyes widened, and he took the device with trembling hands. The moment it touched his skin, the crystal began to glow with an inner fire, and Zara felt something shift in the air between them. A potential for connection that transcended species, transcended fear, transcended everything that had kept their peoples apart. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. Zara stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his luminescent skin. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." As he reached for her, she felt the universe holding its breath, waiting to see if love could indeed. Cale Thorne had never believed in fate until the moment he saw her. Through the observation deck's reinforced glass, the woman sat in what appeared to be deep conversation with one of the ethereal guards, her dark hair catching the ambient light. As she gestured animatedly, something about her posture, her obvious intelligence, made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. "Target acquired," whispered Juno, his second in command, through the comm pressed against his ear. "3 guards, standard energy weapons. The package is in cell block 7. Cale forced himself to focus on the mission. The Resistance had received intelligence about a human prisoner, held aboard the ethereal vessel, someone whose knowledge could tip the balance in their favor. What they hadn't mentioned was that she would be beautiful enough to make him forget his own name. "Change of plans," he murmured, watching as the woman stood and moved toward what looked like a control panel. "We're extracting." The linguist too, that wasn't part of the deal, Cale. "Command specifically said." "Command isn't here," Cale interrupted, his jaw set with determination. "I am, and I'm not leaving anyone behind." The infiltration had taken months of planning. Kel's team had posed as salvage merchants, their modified freighter disguised as a harmless cargo hauler. The ethereal ship's defenses were formidable, but they had one weakness: their arrogance. They simply couldn't conceive of primitive humans being clever enough to penetrate their security. Moving through the ship's maintenance tunnels, Cale felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with a high-stakes operation. His auburn hair was damp with sweat beneath his infiltration suit, and his green eyes swept constantly for threats. Behind him, his team of 5 moved with practiced silence, their bootprints muffled by the ship's ambient noise. They reached the detention level without incident, but as they prepared to breach the first holding cell, Cale heard voices echoing from the chamber where he'd seen the woman. The conversation was in a language he didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. "Juno, take the team and extract the primary target," he ordered. "I'll handle the linguist." "Cale, you can't. That's an order." He slipped away from the group, following the sound of voices until he reached a junction where the corridors split. Through a translucent wall, he could see the woman Zara. He had learned from the intelligence briefing, standing close to an ethereal male, very close. Jealousy flared in his chest, hot and unexpected. He had no claim on this woman, had never even spoken to her. But the sight of her in what appeared to be an intimate moment with their enemy made his trigger finger itch. The ethereal's hand moved to touch something at the woman's throat, and Cale saw her stiffen. Not intimacy, he realized, coercion. Without thinking, he activated the plasma cutter on his belt and began slicing through the wall. The breach alarm started wailing. Just as he stepped through the smoking hole in the barrier, the ethereal spun toward him, those unsettling ocean blue eyes wide with surprise. While Zara stumbled backward with a gasp, "Step away from her," Cale commanded, his weapon trained on the alien's center mass. Up close, he could see the subtle luminescence beneath the creature's skin, the way its pupils dilated in the bright light. "You misunderstand the situation," the ethereal said, its voice carrying a musical quality that made Kel's teeth ache. "I am not harming her." "Funny way of showing it," Cale replied, not lowering his weapon. "Zara Voss, I presume. I'm here to get you out." Zara looked between them, her expression torn. "You don't understand. Vex isn't my captor. He's trying to prevent a war." "Vex?" Cal's lip curled. "How cozy. And I'm sure he's told you all about how much he wants peace while keeping you locked up." The ethereal, Vex, raised his hands slowly. "Your rival is poorly timed. We were just reaching an understanding." "Yeah, I bet you were." Cale gestured toward Zara with his free hand. "Come on, we need to move before their security arrives." But Zara hesitated, her gaze moving to the device in Vex's hand, the translator. Kale realized, recognizing it from the mission briefing. He's right about the war, she said quietly. There are forces on both sides that want conflict. Then we'll figure it out once we're safely away from here, Kale replied. His patience wearing thin, the breach alarm was getting louder, and he could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Vex stepped forward, ignoring the weapon pointed at him. If you take her now, you doom both our species. She carries a gift that could unite the galaxy, but only if used properly. And I suppose you're the one to use it properly. Kel's voice dripped with sarcasm. We were discussing a bonding process, Zara said, her cheeks flushing pink. Something that could allow communication between our species without the need for translators. Kale felt that jealousy flare again, hotter this time. Bonding, right? How convenient for him. It's not like that, Zara protested, though her blush deepened. It's about survival. If we can't find a way to communicate, millions will die. The footsteps were getting closer now, and Kale could see the distinctive blue glow of ethereal energy, weapons reflecting off the corridor walls. Time was running out. Look, he said, his voice urgent. I don't know what kind of mind games this thing has been playing with you, but I do know that my team didn't risk their lives to leave you here. Vex's expression shifted, becoming almost sad. You care for her. It wasn't a question, and Kale felt heat rise in his cheeks. I care about completing the mission, no, Vex said quietly, those ocean eyes studying Kale with uncomfortable intensity. You care for her. I can sense it, the way your biorhythms change when you look at her. The protective instincts that override your tactical training. Stop analyzing me, Kale growled. But he couldn't deny the truth in the alien's words. Something about Zara had captured his attention from the moment he'd seen her. Something that went beyond mere physical attraction. Zara looked at Kale with new eyes, as if seeing him for the first time. You came here for me specifically. The mission was to extract you and another prisoner. Kale admitted. But yes, I volunteered for this assignment. Why? The question hung in the air between them while the sound of approaching guards grew louder. Kale found himself staring into her dark eyes, seeing intelligence and courage and something else that made his heart race. Because, he said simply, someone has to fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. It was then that the first energy bolt sizzled past his ear, and all pretense of civilized conversation ended. Kale spun, returning fire at the ethereal guards who had appeared at the corridor junction. Their weapons were more advanced than his, but he had experience and desperation on his side. This way, he shouted, grabbing Zara's hand and pulling her toward the breach he'd created in the wall. But she resisted, turning back toward Vex. Come with us, she said to the ethereal. If you really want to prevent war, then help us find another way. Vex looked genuinely surprised by the invitation. Your people would never accept me. Then we'll make them, Zara replied firmly, together. Kale wanted to object, wanted to point out that bringing an enemy along would complicate everything. But the look in Zara's eyes brooked no argument, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he recognized that she might be right. If this ethereal really did want peace, then maybe they could use him. Fine, he said tersely. But if he betrays us, I'm spacing him. Vex actually smiled at that, an expression that transformed his alien features into something almost human. A reasonable precaution, they fled through the ship's corridors, Kale leading the way while Vex brought up the rear. The ethereal's knowledge of the ship's layout proved invaluable, guiding them away from security checkpoints and toward the docking bay where Kel's team waited. As they ran, Kale found himself stealing glances at Zara. She moved with surprising grace for someone who had been imprisoned for days, her breathing steady despite the exertion. When she caught him looking, she smiled, a quick, bright expression that made his chest tighten. You're staring, she said, somehow managing to sound breathless and amused at the same time. Just making sure you're keeping up, he replied, though they both knew it was a lie. They reached the docking bay to find Kel's team already aboard their ship, the engines warming up for immediate departure. Juno appeared at the airlock entrance, her expression shifting to alarm when she saw Vex. Kale. What the hell, new passenger, Kale said curtly. I'll explain later. As they boarded the ship, Zara turned to Vex. The bonding process you mentioned. Would it work with him too? She gestured toward Kale. Vex studied Kale with those unsettling eyes. Theoretically, yes, but it would require trust, complete trust, between all parties. Kale felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of bonding are we talking about here? A sharing of consciousness, Vex explained as the ship lifted off from the ethereal vessel. It would allow perfect communication between our species, but at the cost of privacy. You would know my thoughts, and I would know yours, and mine, Zara added quietly. The process requires a triangular connection to be stable. Kale stared. At her, then at Vex, then back at her. The implications were staggering. Not just the tactical advantages of being able to communicate perfectly with a member of the enemy species, but the personal cost. To share his thoughts with this woman he barely knew but already cared about more than he should. We don't have to decide now, Zara said, perhaps sensing his internal struggle. But if we're going to prevent this war, we need to be able to work together. The ship shuddered as they cleared the ethereal vessel's defense perimeter, and Kale felt a familiar sense of relief at another successful extraction. But this time, the relief was mixed with something else, anticipation. Whatever came next, he knew his life had just become infinitely more complicated. And looking at Zara, at the way she stood between him and Vex like a bridge between two worlds, he found he didn't mind the complication at all. Naya Salas had always prided herself on her ability to remain neutral, to see all sides of a conflict with equal clarity. It was what made her such an effective peace negotiator, what had earned her the trust of both human and alien delegations across the galaxy. But as she stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station, watching Kale Thorne's ship dock with an ethereal passenger aboard, she felt that carefully maintained neutrality begin to crack. The emergency session had been called within hours of the extraction mission's success. Representatives from 12 different species had gathered at the neutral station, their faces grim with the knowledge that war might be inevitable. Naya had been appointed as the primary mediator, a role she had accepted with her usual professional detachment. That was before she had seen Kale again. He looked older than when she had last seen him 3 years ago, his auburn hair longer and his green eyes harder. The easy smile she remembered from their academy days was gone, replaced by the focused intensity of a man who had seen too much conflict. When he had kissed her goodbye before joining the resistance, she had thought it was just another of his impulsive gestures. Now she wondered if it had meant more. Naya. The voice belonged to Ambassador Thorne, no relation to Kale, despite the shared surname. The elderly diplomat approached with the careful gait of someone who had spent decades in artificial gravity. The delegates are ready for your opening statement. Naya nodded, smoothing her formal robes, deep blue silk that denoted her status as a neutral mediator. Has there been any word from the ethereal delegation about their missing vessel? They're claiming it was an unprovoked attack, Thorne replied. But their tone suggests they're more concerned about the prisoner, who was taken, than the ship itself. Prisoner. Naya's carefully neutral expression didn't change, but internally she felt a stab of concern. I was told the extraction involved a human linguist. There was a human linguist, Thorne confirmed, but apparently she wasn't being held against her will. And now she's arrived with both a resistance operative and an ethereal defector. Naya absorbed this information with the practiced calm of someone trained in diplomatic crisis management. But beneath the surface, her thoughts were in turmoil. Kale had always been impulsive, but bringing an enemy operative to peace negotiations was beyond reckless. It was potentially catastrophic. The conference chamber was a marvel of neutral architecture, designed to accommodate the physiological needs of dozens of different species. Curved walls of pale amber stone rose to a domed ceiling that mimicked the look of open sky, while the floor was divided into sections with different atmospheric compositions. At the center sat a circular table that could adjust its height and surface texture for each delegate's comfort. As Naya entered, she automatically cataloged the various representatives. The ethereal delegation sat in the section with the highest ambient light, their luminescent skin glowing softly in the artificial radiance. Opposite them, the human contingent occupied a more traditionally lit area, their formal military uniforms creating a stark contrast. to the flowing robes of their alien counterparts. And there, in the section reserved for neutral observers, sat Kale. He had cleaned up since his arrival, trading his infiltration suit for civilian clothes that nonetheless couldn't hide the weapon harnessed beneath his jacket. Beside him sat a woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, the linguist Naya assumed, and next to her, looking profoundly uncomfortable in the mixed atmosphere, was an ethereal male whose presence had already caused several delegates to shift nervously in their seats. Delegates, Naya began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. We are gathered here today to address a situation that threatens to destabilize the entire sector. 3 days ago, a human diplomatic mission was intercepted by ethereal forces. Yesterday, a resistance extraction team boarded an ethereal vessel. Today, we must decide whether these events lead us toward war or toward understanding. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled delegates. I call upon all parties to approach this discussion with open minds and honest hearts. The decisions we make here will affect billions of lives across dozens of worlds. The ethereal delegation's leader, a tall, elegant being whose silver skin seemed to shimmer like liquid metal, rose to speak. Honored mediator, we must object to the presence of the criminal Kale Thorne at these proceedings. His actions constitute an act of war against the ethereal hegemony. Objection noted. Naya replied smoothly. However, Mr. Thorne is here as a witness, not as a defendant. His testimony may be relevant to our understanding of recent events. The human delegation's leader, Admiral Reeves, stood next. We also object to the presence of the ethereal defector. We have no guarantee that this individual isn't a spy or saboteur. Also noted. Naya said, however, all parties present have agreed to submit to neural scanning to verify their truthfulness. This includes both Mr. Thorne and the ethereal witness. She gestured toward the center of the chamber, where a complex piece of scanning equipment had been set up. Before we proceed with testimony, I want to make one thing clear. This device will detect not just lies, but also emotional manipulation, mental compulsion, and other forms of deception. If anyone present is not prepared to submit to such scrutiny, they may leave now. No one moved. Very well. I call upon the first witness, Zara Voss, xenolinguist and diplomatic attaché. Zara stood and moved to the center of the chamber with steady steps, though Naya noticed the way her eyes briefly met Kel's before she took her position beside the scanner. The device hummed to life, its crystalline surfaces beginning to glow with soft blue light. Ms. Voss, Naya began. Please describe the events that led to your presence aboard the ethereal vessel. As Zara spoke, describing the interception of her diplomatic mission and her subsequent imprisonment, Naya found herself watching Kel's face. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched when Zara described her fear and uncertainty. Whatever had happened between them during the extraction, it had clearly affected him deeply. And what was the nature of your interaction with the ethereal identified as Vex? Naya asked, her tone carefully neutral. Zara's cheeks flushed slightly. He revealed that I carry a genetic trait that allows me to communicate directly with other species. He called it the gift of the ancients. A murmur ran through the chamber. The ancients were legend, a species that had supposedly achieved perfect interstellar communication. Before disappearing millennia ago, if such a gift truly existed, he also, Zara continued, her voice dropping slightly, proposed a bonding process that would allow me to share this gift with others, to create a bridge between our species. What kind of bonding? Naya asked. Though she suspected she already knew the answer, a joining of consciousness, Zara replied. It would require intimate contact, a sharing of thoughts and emotions that would be permanent, or at least very long-lasting. Naya felt something cold settle in her stomach. She glanced at Kale and saw that his expression had gone carefully blank. The look he got when he was trying to hide strong emotion. And you agreed to this process? She asked. I was considering it, Zara admitted. The potential benefits to galactic peace seemed to outweigh the personal costs. Until I showed up, Kale said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. Naya turned to him. noting the way his voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. "Mr. Thorne, you're not currently being questioned." "Maybe I should be," he replied, standing and moving toward the scanner. "Because what Ms. Voss isn't telling you is that the bonding process requires multiple participants to be stable, and that both she and this Vex character have asked me to be part of it." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Naya felt her professional composure slip for just a moment, her eyes widening as she processed the implications. A three-way psychic bond between a human, an ethereal, and a woman carrying ancient genetic traits. The tactical advantages would be enormous, but the personal cost, "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "are you saying you've agreed to this bonding process?" Kale took his position beside the scanner, his green eyes meeting hers across the chamber. "I'm saying I'm considering it. If it could prevent a war, if it could save lives." He paused, his gaze shifting to Zara. "Some things are worth the risk." Naya felt a pang of something that might have been jealousy, quickly suppressed. Her relationship with Kale was ancient history, a youthful romance that had ended when their careers took them in different directions. She had no right to feel possessive of him now, but she did, and you, Vex of the ethereal hegemony, she said, turning to the alien who had remained silent throughout the proceedings. "What is your position on this bonding process?" Vex rose gracefully and moved to the scanner, his luminescent skin seeming to pulse with nervous energy. "I believe it is the only way to prevent the war that both our species seem determined to fight. My people have been manipulated, just as yours have been. The true enemy uses our mistrust against us." "The true enemy?" Naya repeated. "The Scythery." Vex replied, the name falling like a stone into still water. "Shapeshifters who have been posing as both human and ethereal officials for decades. They profit from conflict, selling weapons and information to both sides while ensuring that peace remains elusive." Another murmur ran through the chamber, this one tinged with fear. The Scythery were another legend, a species of natural mimics who had supposedly been extinct for centuries. "You have proof of this?" Naya asked. "I have fragments," Vex admitted, "enough to know that the attacks on both our species have been orchestrated from within. But to gather the complete evidence would require the enhanced communication abilities that the bonding process would provide." Naya looked around the chamber, seeing the mixture of hope and fear on the delegates' faces. The logical part of her mind recognized that this could be the breakthrough they needed, the key to preventing a war that would devastate both species. The emotional part of her mind recoiled at the thought of Kale sharing such intimate contact with another woman. "The bonding process," she said carefully, "is it reversible?" "No," Vex replied simply. "The connection, once made, is permanent. We would be linked for life, sharing thoughts and emotions across any distance. And if one of the bonded participants were to die," Naya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer, "the surviving participants would carry the mental echo of the deceased forever," Vex explained. "It is not pleasant." Naya felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. As the mediator, she couldn't make the choice for them, but she could influence it. She could point out the dangers, the personal cost, the uncertainty of success. She could protect Kale from a decision that might destroy him, or she could do her job and recommend the course of action that offered the best chance for peace. She looked at Kale, saw the determination in his green eyes, the way he stood protectively near Zara despite the obvious personal cost. He had always been willing to sacrifice himself for others. It was one of the things that had made her fall in love with him all those years ago. "The chair," she said formally, "recognize is that this decision ultimately rests with the three individuals involved. However, before any bonding process takes place, I recommend that all parties undergo a 72-hour cooling-off period. This will allow time for thorough medical and psychological evaluation, as well as consultation with their respective governments." It was a reasonable recommendation, one that would give them time to find alternatives. But as she spoke, she saw something shift in Kel's expression, a flicker of what might have been disappointment. "Mediator Solace," came a voice from the back of the chamber. "May I suggest an alternative?" Naya turned to see a figure in dark robes standing in the shadows near the chamber's entrance. As the being stepped into the light, she saw features that seemed to shift and blur, as if her eyes couldn't quite focus on them. "I am Counselor Vex," the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Naya's teeth ache. "I represent certain interested parties who have been monitoring these proceedings." Every instinct Naya had developed over years of diplomatic training screamed danger. The scanner beside her began to emit a high-pitched whine, its crystalline surfaces flickering erratically. "Counselor Vex," she said, her voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "You were not included in the list of expected delegates. A regrettable oversight," Vex replied, moving closer to the center of the chamber. As it did, Naya noticed that several of the delegates seemed to shrink back, as if instinctively recognizing a threat. "I come with a proposal that would make this bonding process unnecessary." "What kind of proposal?" Naya asked, though she was already reaching for the emergency alert beneath her podium. "A simple one," Vex said, its shifting features resolving into something almost human. "Surrender the woman with the ancient gift, and we will ensure that both species receive technology that will make war impossible. Refuse, and we will ensure that war is inevitable." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates leaped to their feet, some reaching for weapons while others called for security. In the center of it all, Naya saw Kale moving toward Zara, his protective instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. But it was Vex who reached her first, his luminescent skin suddenly blazing with light as he placed himself between Zara and the mysterious Counselor Vex. "Scythery," he said, his voice carrying a note of absolute certainty. "I knew you would reveal yourselves eventually." Vex's form shimmered, the human appearance melting away, to reveal something reptilian and ancient. Too late, ethereal. "The pieces are already in motion." That was when the lights went out, and Naya's carefully ordered world dissolved into chaos. Dex Meridian had always believed that any problem could be solved with the right application of science and engineering. When the emergency alert reached his laboratory, deep in the research sector of the diplomatic station, his first instinct wasn't to run, it was to analyze. The station's main power grid had been disrupted by what appeared to be a localized EMP burst, but the pattern was all wrong. EMPs typically affected systems in concentric circles. With the most damage at the center, this disruption was surgical, targeting specific systems while leaving others untouched. Life support remained online, but communications were down. Emergency lighting functioned, but security systems were offline. Someone had intimate knowledge of the station's infrastructure. Dex's fingers flew over the backup console in his lab, his pale blue eyes reflecting the glow of holographic displays. As he traced the disruption pattern, his sandy hair fell across his forehead as he worked, forgotten in his intense focus. Around him, the lab hummed with the quiet energy of a dozen different research projects. Quantum resonance scanners, neural interface prototypes, and in the center of it all, his greatest creation, the Universal Harmony Engine, the UHE, was designed to bridge the communication gap between different species by creating a shared neural network. It was similar to the bonding process that the ethereal had described, but technological rather than biological. Dex had been working on it for 5 years, ever since he'd witnessed the breakdown of negotiations between the Terran Alliance and the Regelian collective. The door to his lab hissed open, and he looked up to see 3 figures silhouetted in the corridor's emergency lighting. As they stepped inside, he recognized them from the security feeds he'd been monitoring: Kale Thorne, Zara Voss, and the ethereal called Vex, Dr. Meridian. Zara's voice carried a note of urgency. "We need your help." Dex stood, his tall frame unfolding from the workstation chair. "I've been monitoring the situation. The power disruption was deliberate. Whoever did this knows our systems intimately." "The Scythery," Vex said, his luminescent skin providing the only significant light in the darkened lab. "They've been infiltrating both our species for decades. They would have complete knowledge of your technology." "Scythery?" Dex's scientific curiosity overrode his concern. "I thought they were extinct." "So did we," Kale said grimly. "Unfortunately, we were wrong. And now they've taken control of the station's security systems." Dex absorbed this information with the quick efficiency of a mind trained to process complex Problems. What do you need from me? The mediator mentioned that you've been working on some kind of communication technology, Zara said. Something that could link different species without requiring biological bonding. The Universal Harmony Engine, Dex confirmed, gesturing toward the device at the center of his lab. It was elegant construction of crystalline matrices and quantum processors, roughly the size of a small desk. It creates a shared neural network that allows perfect communication between any number of participants. Could it work as an alternative to the bonding process? Vex asked, his alien features showing obvious interest. Theoretically, yes, Dex replied, but it's still in the prototype stage. I haven't had a chance to test it with multiple species, and the power requirements are enormous. How enormous? Kale asked. Dex checked his readings. It would require channeling the output of the station's primary reactor directly into the device. Under normal circumstances, that would be impossible without authorization from the station commander. These aren't normal circumstances, Zara pointed out. The station commander is either dead or captured, and we're dealing with shape-shifting infiltrators who want to start a war. True, Dex acknowledged. But even if we could access the primary reactor, there's another problem. The UHE creates a permanent neural link between its users. Anyone connected to the network would share thoughts and emotions indefinitely, like the biological bonding process, Vex observed. Exactly. But with one crucial difference, the UHE can link any number of participants, not just 3. In theory, we could create a network that encompasses representatives from every species in the galaxy. Kale frowned. That sounds like it could be dangerous. What happens if someone with hostile intentions gets connected to the network? The network has built-in safeguards, Dex explained. It can only link beings who are genuinely committed to peaceful communication. Anyone harboring deceptive or violent intentions would be rejected automatically. Could it detect Scythery infiltrators? Zara asked. Almost certainly. The network reads brainwave patterns and emotional signatures. Shapeshifters might be able to mimic physical appearance, but they can't replicate the neural patterns of other species. The lights flickered, and Dex's backup systems registered an energy spike from elsewhere in the station. They're trying to access the main computer core, he said, reading the data streams. If they succeed, they'll be able to control everything. Life support, gravity, even the self-destruct system. How long do we have? Kale asked. Maybe an hour, Dex estimated. Less if they have someone who really knows the system. Then we need to try your Universal Harmony Engine, Zara said firmly. It's our only chance to expose the infiltrators and prevent a war. Dex felt a familiar thrill of anticipation mixed with terror. It was the same feeling he'd experienced before every major breakthrough in his career. The moment when theory became reality, when equations became action. There's something else you should know, he said, his voice quiet. The initial connection process is intense. The device has to synchronize with each participant's neural patterns, and that requires complete emotional openness. There can be no secrets, no hidden thoughts or feelings. Zara and Kale exchanged glances, and Dex noticed the way their eyes lingered on each other. Whatever was developing between them, it was still unresolved. What about the power requirements? Vex asked. How do we access the primary reactor? Leave that to me, Dex said. Moving to another console. I've been running unauthorized experiments. For years, I know how to tap into the station's power grid without triggering alarms. As he worked, his fingers dancing over the control surfaces with practiced ease, he became aware of Zara watching him. When he glanced up, she was studying his face with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. You're taking a huge risk, she said softly. If this doesn't work, you could be charged with sabotage, theft of station resources, maybe even treason. If this doesn't work, Dex replied, we'll all be dead, so I won't have to worry about the charges. She laughed, a sound that was both nervous and genuine. You're remarkably calm for someone who's about to test an experimental device that could either save the galaxy or kill us all. I find that panic interferes with problem solving, Dex said. Though he was acutely aware of her proximity, she smelled like some kind of exotic flower, and when she moved closer to peer at his calculations, He had to force himself to concentrate on the equations. "These power draw calculations," she said, her finger tracing across the holographic display. "They're based on theoretical neural load estimates. What if the actual requirements are higher?" Dex blinked, impressed despite himself. "You can read quantum engineering schematics. I have a degree in theoretical physics." Zara replied, "I specialized in xenolinguistics, but I started as an engineer." "Then you know that the power requirements scale exponentially with the number of participants," Dex said. "If we connect more than 5 or 6 individuals, we risk overloading the entire system. But if we connect fewer than that, we might not have enough voices to convince the delegates that the threat is real," Kale pointed out. "There's another consideration," Vex added. "The scifi have been manipulating both our species for decades. They'll have contingency plans, backup infiltrators, ways to discredit any evidence we present." Dex nodded, seeing the problem clearly. "We need to connect enough participants to create an unbreakable chain of testimony, but not so many that the system fails catastrophically." "What about the mediator?" Zara asked. "Nia Salas has the authority to call for emergency protocols. If she were connected to the network, she'd be able to verify our testimony to the entire diplomatic assembly," Kale finished. "But would she agree to it?" There was something in his tone that made Dex look up from his calculations. "You know her?" "We have history," Kale said simply, but the way he said it suggested that history was complicated. "She's a skilled diplomat," Zara observed, "and she seems genuinely committed to peace. If we can convince her that the threat is real, then we need to find her," Dex said. "The network initialization process takes approximately 10 minutes. If we're going to do this, we need to do it soon." He made a final adjustment to the power coupling, and the universal harmony engine began to glow with soft, pulsing light. The crystalline matrices at its